Yay! Hello, everybody. Welcome to the public Q&A for the Lectern's new course, Realizing the Imaginal, which is taught by our wonderful John Viveki. I'm Ethan. I'm here just hosting this public Q&A. And the way that we're going to be doing this is we'll start with just some questions that I have prepped for John just to get us nice and warm and into the space. And then we'll be taking some questions on YouTube live. So if you're watching this, by all means, please feel free to engage in the live chat. I'll be monitoring it on my end so that we can all, I suppose, dive into the imaginal. So, to kick us off, is there anything that we need to know about what you consider to be the distinction between the imagination and the imaginal? We've heard a little bit about that before, but it's always just a nice refresher, John.
Well, part of what I'm going to. Oh, by the way, hello, Ethan. Part of what I want to do with this course is really develop that distinction a lot more deeply. Um, but just as a preliminary warm up, um, and there's parallels in this in some of the romantic philosopher poets like Coleridge, um, which has caused me to have a bit of a reappraisal of the romantics also. But the general idea here is you have the imaginary, which is what we've pretty much reduced the imagination to in many ways, which is the forming of mental pictures in your head that you look at that take you away from reality in some significant extent. Obviously, this has certain value. We can consider possibilities, etc. We can imagine alternative worlds and alternative people and all of that sort of thing in that mental picture sense. But we have good reason to believe that this is not that evolutionarily important or significant because we have now discovered that a large proportion of the population are aphantastic, which sounds amazing, but it means they can't form mental images and have like an inner experience of them. Now, it doesn't mean they can't do the imaginal. The imaginal is not when you're looking at an image, but when you're looking in an like when you're looking through an image. It's adverbial. You're not looking at it, you're looking through it and by means of it and beyond it. So you can ask an fantastic person, well, if you were in your bedroom right now, facing like just entering the bedroom, where's the nearest window? Is it in front of you or to the left or the right? And they can tell you that. They can do that even though they can't form a visual picture uh, uh, in that sense. Now, it turns out that there's probably good reason why that ability is, uh, just endemic in the human species, because it seems to do really, really important cognitive things. Um, and so the imaginal is that idea that you're using the imagination to enhance perception, to sensitize yourself to otherwise subtle patterns, processes, and principles, both in the internal interoceptive environment and the external perceptual environment. Um, and and what that does is that allows you to make yourself more prone to having insight into reality in important ways.
Yeah, for those of you who might not be familiar or are interested in looking this up, I believe the term is aphantasic, John, because
Yeah.
that's also me. I'm one of those people.
Ah,
Aphantasic, Um,
aphantasic. Sorry for my mispronunciation.
it's okay. Fantastic is also quite
Yeah.
interesting as an idea that we don't
Yeah.
get taken away into fantasy. Um, and so this is fascinating because it's one of those, it's actually one of the questions that I wanted to ask. So this is one of those ideas which seem to be permeating the zeitgeist that uh, anything to do with the imagination has to be visual,
Yeah.
and it almost presupposes that. But I'm hearing that that's not the case. So if you could um, dispel one misunderstanding about the imagination as a capacity, right? What would that be, and how? Why is it important for us to know this, and how important is it?
Well, one, I guess if I had to pick one, the one I would want to pick was that it's um, again something that is pervasive in your cognition, and you are constantly making use of it in ways that don't involve visualization. So You're doing it when you look inside yourself and you don't aren't necessarily visualizing. And I ask you, are you having a lot of thoughts running through your mind right now? And you go, well, no. uh, and what are you doing there? Right? It isn't a literal space, but it's not just fictional, because it actually gives you knowledge of your own cognitive processing, and it's actually presupposed by rationality. So there's a good word, fictive, that doesn't mean fictional and doesn't mean literal. Fictive. But you use fictive all over the place. You'll say things like, oh, the fence runs all the way up the mountain. The fence isn't running. That doesn't make any sense. Or you'll say things like, I'm halfway through my course, but I'm bumping up against a lot of obstacles. That's not literally happening to you, but you're not just being fictional. You're trying to relay something that's happening in your life in an important way, right? And so there's all these ways that you are enacting the imaginal in moment by moment. Gestures are imaginal. Uh, we're almost always doing something like you just did right now. You Ray and did this, right? And this is like what? Why? And notice how musically natural that is to us. We just yeah, I know what that means. This is Ethan, and he's sort of he's what he's doing is he's physically orienting, and he's doing this thing as if he was zeroing in on some detail in this visual field, but he's not actually doing that. What he's doing is he is doing that physical metaphor in order to use the machinery that's normally used for doing that kind of perceptual focusing to get more focused on the semantic content of what I'm saying. So you just enacted it. So putting this all together, the imaginal is enacted moment by moment throughout your day. And the first thing we're going to start with is a paper that uses predictive processing to give us this new understanding of the relationship between imagination and perception.
Yeah, and I had gone through that paper a few days ago, and it was really interesting the distinction that the predictive processing is not your brain is not generating a virtual reality of controlled hallucinations. It has to be enacted in the world. I think the term was like it's not a generative model, it's an organismic model. What an
Yes. Yeah.
amazing word,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we are that so much of the ways in which we come to know anything, including um the rational project and placing ourselves within time, is deeply enacted, and it has to be. It was almost one of those things where it's like, well, of course, if you are a virtual reality generating machine, where are you getting that information from if not by
Yeah.
enacting in the world?
Yeah. I have steadfastly criticized the current, and I think it's fashionable way of saying, perception is a controlled hallucination. That makes no sense. It's predictions, and the important property of predictions, science depends on this, is that they can be true. And calling hallucination true it is an oxymoronic term.
Mm.
Hallucination means it's not true. So to call it controlled hallucination is deeply misleading and misdirecting. It sounds sexy and it sounds like we're all living in the matrix kind of thing. But that's not actually how we should understand the predictive processing.
Yeah, because then if we don't check that, it runs very, very head first into the whole sort of like we get trapped in a kind of nominalism and a kind of solipsism of just like, oh no,
Totally.
I'm stuck in prison of my own mind. And I think this course addresses that question. But you oh no, go on before I
Well,
interrupt
yes,
you.
very much. Maybe that's another way of putting it down to a simple point. That the imagination, and this is in the title that you chose for the course. By the way, Ethan chose the title, which I give him the idea, and I give some clunky academic thing because that's what I am, and then he comes up with a sexy name. Uh, realizing, right? Realizing the imaginal, and this is the point that the imagination, in the imaginal sense, is one of our ways of knowing reality, of realizing what is real. And that is very counter to both the sort of uh, Calvinistic notion of the imagination as the a permanent factory for the production of idols, or the romantic notion, the decadent romantic notion of imagination as this other place where you can go into to escape from the burdens and the bonds of
mm,
reality.
mm,
That's
mm,
not that's not what reality. That's not what the imaginal is for. Now, what you can recover that has been lost because of the way we have diminished the imaginal, you can recover that the imaginal can be used to sensitize you, as I said, to patterns and processes you otherwise can't pick up on. That is the primary that thing that people are doing when they're doing practices like Tai Chi Chuan and cultivating an awareness of Qi and other such things. I don't have that paper in yet by Jun
mm.
Sung and I in the syllabus because it isn't published, but I will talk about that work in the course.
But can I just double click on that in terms of practices? Because what I'm really, really curious is where you might see the imagination as a capacity show up in our zeitgeist in the form of practices, in the form of attitudes, um, and what your thoughts might be on it, the way in which we understand the imagination now. We had spoken previously about your criticism about the romantics, right? And how the romantics didn't quite understand, or at least they made it a faculty, but it's not strictly
Yes,
that, it's
that's
more
right.
a capacity. Yeah. So how are you seeing it in the zeitgeist?
In the zeitgeist, I think imagination is still bound up largely with that decadent romanticism. Uh, that imagination is often um, portrayed as the source of our creativity and as I said, a wonderful world so that we can escape to, and we live in the world of the imagination, um, and that's very problematic, as I said, because it actually undermines the proper functioning of the imagination. As you said, the imagination is not a faculty, it's a capacity like rationality. In fact, part of the argument of the course is that the rational and the imaginal are deeply interwoven. But the imaginal is also deeply interwoven with ritual, with practices in which we use the imaginal, the enactment of the imaginal, in order to alter our sensitivities so we can know reality in a way that empowers us in many domains and dimensions of our life. That's a good ritual. Now, what that means is the imagination is that which glues together ritual and right rational. So the three ALs, the ritual, imaginal, and rational, are all deeply interwoven, and that cuts against many of the divides that we have built around the mind and the world from uh, the advent of modernity in the European Enlightenment.
Mm, mm. So I want to pick up on this a little bit when you talk about ritual, because the way that I come to know ritual is twofold, right? One is as a theater practitioner, right?
Mm-hmm.
We learn that in sort of theater history and anthropology, and then the other side is through Jung. And those of you who have seen me online before know that I always bang on about Jung. He's going to pop in sooner or later. But we had a conversation a couple of months ago around active imagination, right? And the ways in which active imagination and Jung's legacy around that has been taken up. And actually, it still has quite a life today. But you had said something around the the way in which active imagination was purported by Jung um, self-selects for people who are like him. He was on one end of the imagination spectrum,
Yeah, yeah. He
and I
was at the
see that in what you're
opposite
saying.
from the people who lack the visualization ability. He's a vivid visualizer, and active imagination, um, and because we did, and it's not we shouldn't criticize Young. That knowledge was not available.
Yeah.
Young quite reasonably assumed that everybody was basically like him in this ability, and many people are not. He's on like if there's a graph of the distribution, here's the mean, right?
Mm,
He's way up here in super visualizer, and but there's a lot of people that are all the way, including people at this end, that are very poor in visualization. And other techniques have emerged that are much more enacted, imaginal practices,
oh,
analogous to uh, do things that are analogous to active imagination. Sorry,
hang on.
hang on.
Can we
Yeah,
hear?
Riverside's doing something weird right now.